Hello everybody, my name is Alexis Elijah and my presentation is on mental illness, specifically phobias. So, what is the most common phobia today? First off, I'm going to start off with what are phobias. So, a phobia is an uncontrolled and an extreme irrational fear. With phobias, you might experience a strong feeling of dread or panic when you encounter the reasoning of your fear. Fear can be a certain place, like a hospital, a situation, like being chased by a clown, or even an object, like a doll. Unlike common anxiety disorders, a phobia is normally connected to something specific. The impact of a phobia can go from annoying to severely enfeeble. People with phobias can usually realize their fear is irrational, but they aren't able to do anything about it or for it. This fear can interfere with work, it could interfere with school, or even personal relationships. Overall, it impacts your whole life. Over here, I have examples of some phobias. We have androphobia, fear of men, claustrophobia, fear of confined or crowded spaces, hydrophobia, fear of water, and coulrophobia, fear of clowns. So, what is the most common phobia? Agoraphobia. So agoraphobia is a fear of avoidant situations and or places that could possibly cause panic or the feeling of being trapped, helpless, and or embarrassed. I think it's becoming one of the most common phobias today because it's an easy phobia to develop. Agoraphobia can be passed down. For example, a young child who has a close relative with an anxiety disorder is also at risk of developing a phobia. The pandemic is also a key factor of why this phobia is becoming more common because a traumatic event like this can cause a fear. And lastly, statistics on agoraphobia show great results. So some key points to summarize. Developing through close relatives. So a twin study actually showed that when one twin has agoraphobia, the second twin has a 39% chance of developing the same phobia. In early researchers, it also appeared that agoraphobia is closely linked to panic disorders. Developing through a traumatic event, the economic and social consequences of the pandemic have been far-fetching and unknown around the world. These circumstances appear to have had knowledgeable psychological effects on all humans. Another point is, as I said, agoraphobia, which is a fear of a certain situation in crowds. Being in a crowd of strangers, potentially with COVID, can be really triggering for people who already have this phobia or triggering for people who could possibly develop this phobia. And third point, facts. The general ubiquity of phobias in children and young adolescents specifically is 19.7%. The most common phobia is followed by agoraphobia with 8.6%. And secondary school children were highly affected with agoraphobia with 11.7%. So, hereditary. Studies show supporting the theory that genetics plays a major role in this actually. Researchers have found that first-degree relatives of someone suffering from a phobia are approximately 3 times more likely to develop a phobia. Other studies show that twins who were raised separately have a higher rate of developing similar phobias. Other studies showed that some phobias run in families, with relatives of phobia sufferers more likely to develop a phobia. As I stated in the points, twin studies show that one twin has agoraphobia, the second twin has a 39% chance of developing it too. Well, when one twin has a specific phobia, the second twin has a 30% chance of also developing that specific phobia. This is a lot higher than the 10% chance of developing an anxiety disorder found in the general population. So these disorders can separate in large families and have a huge heritability. The genetics are complex, but with a big non-genetic contribution as well as partial overlaps in phenotypes, which makes linkageable analysis identify genes a difficult endeavor. The coronavirus. So again, to the side here, I have agoraphobia being an easy phobia to develop, being caused by traumatic events, and that linking to coronavirus, which is an infectious, possibly deadly disease being spread by people. Respiratory droplets and astrals create when infected people cough, sneeze, sing, shout, or even talk. So again, the fear of not wanting to go places or being in big crowds or in public places because the paranoia of not knowing people, like where they've been or what they do or if they're being safe or possibly having this virus. It could cause an extreme anxiety or fear, making the person not want to go to those places. So first I want to say what COVID-19 scale is, because it plays a big part, I think, in this situation. So it's a recently developed scale to assess different aspects of the fear of the pandemic. And judging fear is important. It's the main reason the fear of COVID-19 scale was developed. It is to be said that without actually knowing the level of fear about the pandemic among different groups, like age, race, by specific individual level factors like gender, age, education, and so on, and or different psychological variables like personality types. It is hard to find out whether education and prevention programs are needed to calm people, and if they are needed, which groups do they need to target and where. The application of all this data could be used to conceive targeted education and prevention programs to help overcome the fear of COVID-19 and help all the individuals suffering to engage in preventative behaviors. So basically it's sorting out who has just bad anxiety over the pandemic and who could be possibly developing agoraphobia. Statistics. As I said in previous slides, the general ubiquity of phobias in children, young adolescents was 19.7%, but among children with phobias, girls had a higher rate of phobias with 62.4%, and boys were around 37.6%. Almost half of the total sufferers were in the 12 to 15 age range group, making it 46.3%. Again, here we have the most common phobias, followed by agoraphobia, 8.6%. Secondary school children were highly affected with agoraphobia, 11.7%. And treatment is very difficult, and only 10% of people succeed. And again, I think that plays with if it's so easy to develop, especially with this pandemic, and only 10% have a chance of succeeding in treatment, the rates are just going to go up. Here I have found a TED Talk on agoraphobia. Linda Bussey, as someone who has suffered from anxiety and panic attacks for most of her life, Linda shares how she was able to push herself to take on public roles for much of her adult life. So basically she talks about agoraphobia, she talks about her experiences and her stories, and she talks about how she lives with having agoraphobia, which was very interesting. It was very insightful. And if you like, I have the link right here if you want to watch it. So in conclusion, I made a little mind map with agoraphobia slowly rising, treatment is exceedingly difficult, with only 10% of people being successful. With the pandemic also affecting the rates in people with this phobia because it's so easy to develop. And agoraphobia is already a serious disorder that is common within people. It's common within families. We also have the COVID-19 scale that helps figure out the difference between anxiety and the phobia. And over to the right, in the middle, we have the most obvious statement of my conclusion that agoraphobia is becoming the most common phobia. Here is just my references, my sources, where I got the information. And that is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for listening. If you have any questions, comment below. I'll be happy to answer them for you. Thank you for your time.